Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Biology with Miss Judd. Now, as we learned in lesson 1, evolution is a thing, right? It's a thing that we can actually observe happening on our planet, thanks to Charles Darwin pointing it out. Now, today I want to give you guys about 4 pieces of evidence for that evolution, because our world has offered us both physical, biochemical, even prehistoric pieces of evidence that this process is occurring and that it's occurred in the past and is still happening today. Remember that we are talking about this because evolution is a key unifying principle in biology. Theodosius Dobzhansky once said, "Nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution." So today we want to say what features make sense through this evolution and what are the indications or traces that show that evolution has taken place and is still happening today. Let's take out our notes, have something to write with, have our listening ears on. I think it's time to send it up to Miss Judd in the corner. Hello, everybody. Miss Judd in the corner here. I haven't seen your faces in so long, it feels like. I'm here today to talk to you guys about the evidence for evolution. So last lesson, we learned that evidence is a thing that Charles Darwin gave us. Evolution is a change in population of organisms over time. And today I want to provide you 4 pieces of evidence that says, no, this is really a thing. This is how our planet and our world operates. I do want to note something that Miss Ray said last lesson. This is happening at the population level of our world. So it's not a single individual, but a whole group of organisms. They're the ones changing over time. So my 4 pieces that we're going to jump into are fossils, comparative anatomy, embryology, and biochemistry. Let's get started. The fossil record is the preserved remains or traces of an organism that is no longer living. Now, this fossil record is when organisms die and get trapped in rock's layers. So we're left with their remains. And we can determine, based on where these organisms are in the rock, how old they are. The first type of dating that we can do is called relative dating. So based on the depth of the rock layers, we can consider how old the fossils are. So the fossils on the lower layers died first, so they are older. And then as time passes, more layers are added and added and added, and then we have another fossil. An organism dies and gets buried in the rock, and that's a younger fossil. And that's called relative dating because we're saying that this fossil is older than the one on top. There are ways to do absolute dating. Absolute dating, we take a look at elements and how they break down. It's called radioactive isotope dating. So we can actually say, by looking at the carbon-14 at this lower level and say, okay, we know that it takes this long for carbon-14 to break down, and there's this much carbon-14 left. So this fossil has to be 530 million years old, which is pretty cool that we can actually give an age. Now, this is a good point. When we're looking at the fossil record, we're looking at changes in organisms in millions of years, lots of time, not just like yesterday. This fossil record tells us that organisms have appeared and disappeared and changed over time. This also shows us the extinction of species. We don't have organisms that look like this on our planet anymore. But because their remains are found, we know that our planet used to have organisms like that. They're just now extinct. This fossil record also tells us that there was a different climate and environmental conditions. So it gives us hints of an ancient climate. For example, we are currently not in an ice age, thank goodness, but we can look at our fossil record and see that there was an ice age previously. It also indicates a development of life from simple to complex. 550 million years ago, life was super simple. There wasn't a whole lot of complex organisms that are large. And then as you develop, you see a lot more older or complex fossils like a dinosaur. It also indicates that life begins in water. So life began with marine organisms, which looking at these fossils, we can see that life began with marine organisms. The second piece of evidence that our world offers us is comparative anatomy. With comparative anatomy, we will be studying the anatomical structures to find similarities and differences. The first one I want to talk about is homologous structures. So looking at the bones or the makeup of organisms, if they have a very similar basic structure, it shows that they evolved from a common ancestor with that same basic version of that structure. But they evolved to do different things. So homologous structures are parts of organisms with similar structures, but different functions. So if you look at the human, the cat, the whale, and the bat, we all have very similar and the same bone organization, including all the tiny little bones in our fingers. But the human uses its arm to grab things, the cat uses its paws to walk, the whale uses its flippers to swim, and the bat uses its wings to fly. Very different functions, all coming from the same bone structure. We can compare this to analogous structures. These are structures of organisms that have the same function but different structures. And we can take the look at anal, which means different. So we here have bats and insects. The insects are made of very different materials. The insect is made of a chitin wing. The bat is made of bone and skin. They do the same thing. It helps the organism fly, but they must have evolved independently to make that same function because the structures have no similarities. Then we have vestigial structures. These are reduced body parts that have little to no function. So it shows that body parts are from a previous ancestor. These inherited structures might not be needed in a different situation. So our appendix has no function right now, but we still have one in our bodies. A lot of people get it removed. Our goosebumps used to make our hair puff out, but we now have very little hair on our arms, so we just get goosebumps. Those are reduced body parts that have no function. Fun fact, snakes have leg bones. Obviously, they don't have legs. They don't crawl, but they have that vestigial structure. The third piece of evidence for evolution is embryology. This is stages of development before the birth of an organism. The patterns of embryological development are similar patterns as an organism goes from being a fertilized egg into an adult form. And looking at this image, the fish, turtle, chicken, pig, and adult, as an adult, we can definitely tell the difference. But as we go back to its development before birth, the developing embryo all looks very similar. Like, for example, even adults and pigs and turtles had a tail. Fish, birds, mammals, and reptiles also all had gills, but only fish retained theirs. This shows that we developed this pattern from a common ancestor. We have just since then evolved to be different. Lastly, we have biochemistry, proteins, RNA, and DNA molecules. We learned that there's a universal genetic code. Every organism has A, T, C's, and G's. It goes through protein synthesis. And that in itself is a piece of evidence for evolution. We can see that some organisms are more closely related because their biochemical makeup is similar. So looking at this fly and this human, obviously if we looked at the form of a fly and a human, pretty different. But we have the same pattern of gene clusters, which indicates that there is a common ancestor. It probably is many millions of years ago, but there at one point in time was a common ancestor. And this universality of genetic code supports evolution. All right, I'm going to send it back to Miss Judd. Thank you so much, and have a great day, you guys. Thanks, Miss Judd in the corner. That was fantastic work. Once you have your notes completed, let's look into that practice and make sure that we can apply these examples to show that there's evidence for evolution. Now, remember that a key word here that you've heard so many times over is common ancestor. When in doubt, common ancestor. So keep that in mind as you go through this practice. Have a great day and make good choices.